It was a typical night with my parents out of town for the weekend and me home alone. I was looking forward to having the house to myself, thinking I could finally watch some scary movies in peace. Around 11 p.m., I was in the living room, engrossed in a horror film, when I heard a loud crash coming from the kitchen. My heart raced as I slowly made my way to investigate. As I entered the kitchen, I saw that a window had been smashed open. Panic set in as I realized someone had broken into my home. I frantically searched for a weapon to defend myself, finally grabbing a baseball bat from the hallway closet. With the bat in hand, I cautiously made my way through the house, checking every room. The house was eerily silent, save for the sound of my own rapid breathing. I strained my ears, listening for any other noises that might give away the intruder's location. Suddenly, I heard a floorboard creak from behind me. I spun around, bat raised, coming face to face with a masked figure. We stared at each other for a moment, frozen, before the intruder lunged at me. I swung the bat with all my might, connecting solidly with the person's shoulder. They let out a pained cry and stumbled backwards. I didn't hesitate, swinging the bat again and again until they collapsed to the floor, unmoving. Hands shaking, I ran to the phone and dialed 911. As I waited for the police to arrive, I stood guard over the intruder, bat still gripped tightly. It was the longest and most terrifying night of my life. It was a chilly November night and I was home alone. My parents had gone out for the evening, leaving me to my own devices. I decided to spend the night catching up on some reading, curled up on the couch with a cup of hot tea. As I started to get absorbed in my book, I suddenly became aware of a strange noise coming from the kitchen. It sounded like the faint creaking of the floorboards. My heart began to race as I strained to listen more closely. Slowly, I set down my book and tea, grabbing a nearby flashlight. Cautiously, I made my way towards the kitchen, the beam of the flashlight cutting through the darkness. Everything seemed normal at first glance, but I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that I was not alone. I continued searching the kitchen, my nerves on edge. That's when I noticed the basement door was slightly ajar. A chill ran down my spine. I distinctly remembered locking that door before settling in for the evening. Mustering my courage, I crept towards the basement, the old wooden stairs creaking under my weight. As I reached the bottom, I shone the flashlight around, my breath catching in my throat. There, huddled in the corner, was a shadowy figure. I froze, too terrified to move. The figure slowly turned towards me, and in the dim light I could make out the glint of eyes reflecting the flashlight beam. Without thinking, I scrambled back up the stairs, slamming and locking the basement door behind me. I rushed to the front door, fumbling with the locks, desperate to get out of the house. As I flung the door open and ran outside, I could have sworn I heard a low, guttural growl from the basement. To this day, I have no idea what was down there, and I never want to find out. It was a cold, rainy night and I was home alone. My parents had gone out for the evening, leaving me to fend for myself. I settled in on the couch, planning to watch some TV and maybe read a book before heading to bed. As the evening wore on, the rain outside started coming down even harder, the wind howling through the trees. I found myself growing increasingly uneasy, jumping at every creak and groan of the old house. Around midnight, the power suddenly went out, plunging the house into complete darkness. I scrambled to find some candles and a flashlight, my heart pounding in my chest. The eerie stillness was deafening, broken only by the sound of the rain pounding against the windows. As I sat there, the flickering candlelight casting shadows that danced across the walls, I heard a strange noise coming from the hallway. It sounded like the faint creaking of floorboards, as if someone was slowly walking towards me. I froze, my breath caught in my throat, too afraid to even call out. The footsteps grew closer and closer, until I was certain there was someone or something just outside the room. I strained my eyes, trying to make out any movement in the darkness. Suddenly, a dark figure appeared in the doorway. I let out a terrified scream, instinctively grabbing the nearest object, a heavy candlestick, and hurling it towards the figure. There was a loud crash as the candlestick hit its mark, followed by a pained howl. The figure stumbled backwards, disappearing into the shadows. I scrambled to my feet, fumbling for the front door, desperate to get out of the house. As I flung the door open and ran outside, I risked a glance back towards the house. In the faint glow of the streetlights, I could see a dark shape moving in the window watching me. To this day, I have no idea what or who I encountered that night. I never liked being home alone, but at 17 I was old enough to handle it. Or so I thought. My parents left for a weekend getaway, promising to be back Sunday night. I settled in for a quiet Friday evening, microwaving some popcorn and queuing up a movie marathon. As night fell, the house creaked and groaned, sounds I usually ignored but now seemed amplified in the silence. I tried to focus on the movie, but found myself constantly glancing at shadowy corners and jumping at every unexpected noise. Around midnight, I decided to call it quits and head to bed. As I climbed the stairs, a loud thump from the attic made me freeze. My heart raced as I listened intently, trying to convince myself it was just the house settling or maybe a raccoon. But then I heard it again, a distinct shuffling sound, like something dragging across the floor. With shaking hands, I pulled out my phone and dialed 911, keeping my voice low as I explained the situation to the dispatcher. They assured me they'd send an officer to check things out, but it would take about 20 minutes for them to arrive. Those 20 minutes felt like an eternity. I armed myself with a baseball bat from my room and stood at the bottom of the attic stairs, straining to hear any more noises. The shuffling had stopped, but now I could swear I heard faint, raspy breathing. Suddenly, the attic door flew open with a bang. I stumbled backward, raising the bat as a dark figure emerged from the shadows. In the dim light, I could make out matted hair, wild eyes, and what looked like blood-stained clothing. I screamed and swung the bat, connecting with a sickening thud. The intruder howled in pain and lunged at me. We grappled, tumbling down the stairs. I fought with everything I had, kicking and clawing as we rolled across the floor. Just as the intruder's hands closed around my throat, red and blue lights flashed through the windows. The police had arrived. The intruder loosened their grip, momentarily distracted, and I seized the opportunity to break free and run for the door. I burst outside, gasping for air, as two officers rushed past me with guns drawn. Minutes later, they emerged with the intruder in handcuffs, a disheveled man who'd apparently been living in our attic for days, sneaking down to steal food when we slept. The following weeks were a blur of police statements, therapy sessions, and my parents' profuse apologies for leaving me alone. We moved shortly after, but I still have nightmares about those raspy breaths and wild eyes in the darkness. To this day, I can't shake the feeling that I'm never truly alone in a house, no matter how secure it seems.